The wind was the first thing you noticed about Red Bluff. It never stopped. It came off the high desert carrying grit that stung the skin and tasted of alkali. It was a wind that dried a man out, body and soul. This was the territory in the 1870s, maybe creeping toward the 1880s. And Red Bluff was a fresh wound on the land. It was not a town built on hope. It was a town built on speculation. It huddled between sun-scorched hills and the dry, cracked bed of a creek that only remembered water during flash floods. The railroad was coming. That was the promise and the threat. The whisper of it had brought the speculators, the laborers, the gamblers, and the women who had run out of other options. Ambrose Calder was the name on the promise. He was the railroad baron, the silver mine investor, the man who saw this empty land not as a home, but as an asset sheet. He promised a boom. He promised civilization. But the civilization he was bringing looked mean and thirsty. High above the noise, a single hawk rode the thermals. Its shadow passed over the dusty main street, over the half-built storefronts and the canvas tents. The hawk saw the tension stretched thin, a wire waiting to snap. It saw the Comanche camps, the people of the high plains, being squeezed, their ancestral hunting grounds measured by men with chains and transit levels. Keona Blackhorn stood in the sliver of shade provided by the sheriff's office. The townspeople called him Kai. He was Comanche. He had spent years as a scout for the army, reading the land like a letter, until he realized the letters he was reading were death warrants for his own people. Now he wore a deputy's badge. It was federal steel, bright against his dark shirt. It was a heavy weight. The badge was a contract. It paid him $10 every week. $10 he was saving, dollar by dollar, to buy back the herd of mares, his family's horses, bred for speed and spirit, taken by a government agent over a broken treaty stipulation. The agent had sold them cheap. Kai intended to buy them back, no matter the cost. He walked a razor's edge. He carried the white man's law, but his blood remembered the law of the tribe, the law of the earth. In Red Bluff, he was the half-trusted Comanche, the man Sheriff Tully kept close. Sheriff Tully, a man whose belly was soft and whose eyes were hard. Tully ran Red Bluff, but Kai knew Tully answered to Ambrose Calder. Kai's conflict was a quiet fire in his gut. The badge gave him access. It let him walk the street armed. It let him ask questions, but it also chained him. It demanded he enforce laws that were designed to break his people. He was supposed to keep the peace, but the peace in Red Bluff was just a word for Ambrose Calder getting what he wanted without firing his own gun. Ambrose Calder was rarely seen. He stayed in his private railroad car, rumored to have velvet curtains and cold champagne. He did not dirty his hands. For that, he had Sheriff Tully. Tully was the face of the law, the man who smiled at the town council and signed the eviction notices. And for the work the law could not do, Tully had Lobo Gray. Gray and his gang were phantoms. They rode hard, they hit fast, and they always left a calling card. An arrow fletched in the Comanche style, a broken lance, sometimes a scalp. They were raiders, brutal and efficient, and every raid they conducted, every wagon they burned, every homestead they terrified. The blame fell squarely on these savages. The newspapers in the East would print the stories. The politicians would demand action, and Ambrose Calder would quietly file claims on the newly unprotected land near his silver mine. Kai knew the truth. He had seen their tracks. Lobo Gray's men rode shod horses, not the unshod ponies of the plains. The arrows they left were new wood, artificially aged with mud. The fletching wrong. It was a clumsy forgery. But in a town primed by fear, it was enough. Tully knew Kai knew, and Kai knew Tully knew. It was a silent, dangerous game. Kai was trapped. If he spoke out, he lost the badge. If he lost the badge, he lost the horses, and he lost any chance to protect the hunting grounds. Across the street, the hinges on the Silver Spur saloon squeaked. Elena Serrano stepped out onto the boardwalk, checking a ledger. She was to Red Bluff. the saloon's administrator. She managed the inventory, paid the piano player, and sometimes, when the crowd was right, she sang. She was Mexican-American, with eyes that held a depth the rowdy prospectors mistook for sadness. They were wrong. It was not sadness, it was focus. When she sang, her voice was low and clear, cutting through the smoke and the smell of cheap whiskey. It was a voice that reminded men of things they thought they had lost. But Elena Serrano was a lie, a beautiful, carefully constructed lie. The saloon was her cover. The ledger was her code book. She was an operative for the Pinkerton Detective Agency. She had been sent west not to chase train robbers, but to follow the trail of paper. She was investigating Ambrose Calder. Her employers in Chicago were concerned about his monopoly, about the rumors of land fraud that were so vast they threatened federal stability. Elena was tracking a conspiracy, a ring of thieves who used murder and forgery to steal land, specifically the land rich in silver that bordered the Comanche holy sites. She was alone, armed only with her wits and the cover of a woman just trying to run a small business. The sun was low, painting the sky in colors of blood and bruising. The day's heat was finally breaking. Kai was walking his rounds, his boots silent in the thick dust. He turned into the alley beside the Silver Spur. The air was thick with the smells of the saloon stale beer, old grease, and the faint, sweet scent of Elena's lavender water. He saw her near the back entrance. She was not the saloon singer now. Her shoulders were tense. A man was with her. A nervous, sweating man Kai recognized as a surveyor from Calder's railroad crew. The man looked over his shoulder, his eyes wide with fear. He shoved a thick, oilcloth-wrapped envelope into her hands. "This is all I have," the man whispered, his voice shaking. "He finds out? I am a dead man." "You did the right thing," Elena said. Her voice was not the singing voice. It was low, steady, and cold. The surveyor nodded, almost a spasm. And then he bolted, running down the alley and disappearing onto the main street. Elena tucked the package into her waistband, beneath her shawl. She took a breath, composing herself, turning back toward the saloon door, and she saw him. Kai stood 10 yards away, half hidden by the shadow of the water tower. He did not move. He did not reach for his gun. He simply watched. Elena froze. All the poise, all the practiced ease of the saloon hostess vanished. He saw the flash of pure, undiluted fear in her eyes. She was caught. Kai looked at her. He saw the envelope she was hiding. He saw the surveyor's terror. This was not a whiskey receipt. This was not a lover's note. This was the kind of secret that got men like the surveyor killed. Her eyes met his. The seconds stretched. Kai saw the calculation in her gaze. She was assessing him. Was he Tully's man, or was he something else? He saw her dismiss the badge. Her eyes looked past the tin star and searched his face, searching for the Comanche, for the man, trying to read his intent. And Kai saw her. He saw past the songs and the polite smiles. He saw a woman who was just as trapped as he was, walking her own razor's edge. He did not know her game, but he recognized the player. She was, in that moment, more real than anyone else in Red Bluff. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Not of approval, not of threat, just acknowledgement. Elena did not smile. She held his gaze, a silent, complex question passing between them. Then, with deliberate calm, she turned her back to him and stepped inside the Silver Spur. The door clicked shut. Kai remained in the alley. The hawk, which had been circling all day, let out a sharp cry and dove, disappearing behind the hills. The first chill of the night wind swept through the alley, carrying the sound of the approaching railroad, the distant thud of spikes being driven. He touched the cold metal of the badge on his chest. It felt heavier than usual. The law was being bought and sold in this town. The truth was being passed in secret envelopes in dark alleys. Kai looked at the door she had disappeared through, then up at the darkening sky. The central question of his life settled hard in his stomach. When the real fight came, where would he stand with the bright, hollow badge, or with the truth? He did not have an answer. He only knew, as he stepped back onto the main street, that the answer would cost him everything. The news came 3 days later, arriving like a gunshot. It was not a rumor. It was a wreck. The morning freight coach, the one carrying payroll and, more importantly, the survey maps for Ambrose Calder's new silver claim, was hit. It limped into Red Bluff drawn by 2 horses instead of 6, its sides looking like a porcupine, bristling with arrows. The driver, a man named Hap, was slumped over, shot through the shoulder. "Comanche," he gasped, as Sheriff Tully and Kai pulled him down. "A whole war party. They came out of the rocks, took the map box, took the payroll." The town, already tense, snapped. Men grabbed rifles from the general store. Women pulled their children inside. Within an hour, Red Bluff was an armed camp, united by fear and the old, familiar hatred. By noon, the propaganda was tacked to every post. Handbills, printed quickly on Ambrose Calder's private press, had appeared as if by magic. Red Bluff under siege. Comanche savages attack mining survey. All citizens must arm. Sheriff Tully wore an expression of grave concern, which sat poorly on his flushed, whiskey-soaked face. "Kai," he boomed, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "I want you to ride out there. I want you to use those tracker eyes of yours and find their trail. Find where those red devils are hiding." Kai swung onto his horse, his face impassive. The crowd parted for him, their eyes a mixture of suspicion and expectation. He was their tame Indian, the one who would hunt the wild ones. He rode west, toward the canyon where the coach was hit. The scene was loud, too loud. It was a performance. He dismounted, walking the ground. The arrows? They were Comanche style, but the fletching was sloppy, using gray goose feathers instead of the hawk feathers his people preferred. The paint was bright, too bright, not the worn, faded pigment of a warrior's kit. He pulled one from the side of the wrecked coach. He sniffed the shaft. Pine resin, fresh, used to glue the arrowhead. A clumsy, hasty trick. This was white man's work, meant to look like Indian work. It was an amateur's attempt to mimic a master. He found the tracks of the shod horses, deep and heavy, where they had waited for the coach. Then he found the cut harness. The driver had said the attackers cut the lead horses loose. Kai examined the leather. It was not a frantic slice made in the heat of a raid. It was a single, deep cut, clean and efficient, finished with a small, distinctive notch at the end. A signature. Kai had seen it once before, on a stolen horse in the Northern Territory. It was Lobo Gray's mark. He rode back to Red Bluff slow, the sun burning his neck. He did not report to Tully. He went to the stables, tending to his horse, letting the familiar rhythm of the work clear his head. He needed to think. The alley, the surveyor, the envelope, and now this. Darkness fell. He moved through the back streets, avoiding the lamplight from the main road, where angry, drunken men were forming impromptu militias, firing their guns into the air. He found himself in the alley behind the Silver Spur, the air cool and quiet. She was waiting, as if she knew he would come. Elena Serrano stepped from the shadows. She was not wearing her beaded saloon dress. She wore dark riding breeches and a simple shirt, her hair tied back. She looked like a different woman, a dangerous one. They were not Comanche. Kai stated. It was not a question. "No," she said. Her voice was quiet, lacking the melodic lilt she used for the customers. "They were Lobo Gray's men." "They hit the coach for the maps," Kai said. Elena shook her head, stepping closer. He could smell the faint scent of lavender and dust. "They hit the coach to swap the maps. The envelope I got 3 nights ago from the surveyor. That was the real map. The one on the coach was a forgery, meant to be stolen." Kai processed this, a complex lie, layered like stone. "Why?" "Because the real map shows the big silver lode. It is not where Calder is claiming. It is 2 miles north." She paused. right on the edge of your people's sacred lands. The spirit spring. The blood in Kai's veins went cold. The spirit spring, a place of healing, a place forbidden to all but the oldest medicine men. Calder cannot file a claim on protected land. Elena continued, her voice urgent and low. Not unless the treaty is broken. Not unless the Comanche are declared hostile. He is not just stealing silver. Kai, he is provoking a war to get it. Tully knows, Kai said. The words tasted like ash. Tully is paid. Elena reached into her shirt and pulled out a small, stiff photograph. A tintype. She handed it to him. Kai angled it toward a sliver of moonlight filtering between the buildings. It was grainy, taken from a distance, but the figures were unmistakable. Ambrose Calder, standing outside a rough-hewn shack. Next to him, smiling and holding a bottle, was Sheriff Tully. And on the other side of Calder, his face scarred and his eyes dead, stood Lobo Gray. Proof, Elena whispered. Calder, his lawman, and his cutthroat, all in one happy family. I took this 2 weeks ago at their private mining camp, the one they keep hidden up in the Coyote Hills. Kai stared at the image, the entire rotten structure of Red Bluff, captured in silver nitrate, the lie he had been living, the compromise he had been making. It all fell apart. The back door of the sheriff's office banged open the next morning. Kai was standing by the empty holding cell, cleaning his rifle. Sheriff Tully stormed in. His face was purple, his eyes shot with red. Where have you been? Blackhorn. Tully spat. I gave you an order. I wanted that trail found. I found the trail, Kai said, his voice flat. He did not look up from his rifle. It went cold near the dry fork. Tully slammed his meaty fist on the desk, rattling the inkwell. It did not go cold. My scouts found it. It leads straight toward the spirit spring, straight toward your people. Kai stopped cleaning. He slowly looked up, his eyes meeting Tully's. That is not possible. Do not tell me what is not possible. Tully leaned in, his voice dropping to a growl, his breath hot with whiskey. The town is screaming for blood. Ambrose Calder himself rode in this morning. He wants those maps back, and he wants the savages responsible strung up. He wants that treaty land declared hostile territory. Tully jabbed a thick finger at Kai's chest. And you are going to lead the posse. You are going to take 30 men, ride into that camp, and you are going to arrest the men responsible. You are going to bring them back. Do you understand me, Deputy? The room was thick with silence. Kai could feel the weight of the photograph in his breast pocket, resting against his skin. He could feel the lie in Tully's throat. I will not lead an attack on my own people based on a false trail, Kai said. Tully's face changed. The fake anger evaporated, replaced by cold convenience. Is that so? He straightened up, walking behind his desk. Well, you are a government man. Kai, you took the oath. You took the pay. You refuse a direct order. That badge comes off. He paused, letting the threat hang in the dusty air. And if that badge comes off, you are just another Comanche in a town that wants to hang a Comanche. You will never see those horses again, and I will lead the posse myself, and I am not as gentle as you. This was the trap. The badge was his only protection. It was his only leverage to get the horses. But to keep it, he had to betray the spirit spring. If he refused, he lost everything, and Tully would ride out anyway, and there would be a massacre. The badge was not power. It was a leash. Kai walked out of the office. He did not slam the door. He walked, his stride measured, out onto the boardwalk. The town looked different. The sunlight felt false. The noise of the angry citizens sounded distant. He stood there, and he heard the voice of the old Nani, the elder who had taught him. He remembered sitting by the fire, years ago, confused and angry after his first tour as an army scout. You wear their metal, the old man had said, his voice like dry leaves blowing over rock. You think it makes you strong. You think it makes you one of them. or one of us. It does neither. It is just metal. Do not let it buy your spirit. Kiona, the only freedom that matters is the one that lives inside your chest. That is the only law that follows you when you die. The freedom not in the metal on his chest. Kai knew what he had to do. He had to walk the third path, the path between. He turned and went back into the office. Tully was pouring a whiskey, his back to the door. "When do we ride?" Kai asked. Tully smiled, a slow, wet unfolding of his lips. He turned, holding the glass. "Dawn, you gather the men." Kai nodded. "I will need tonight to prepare, to track. I must go to the ridges alone first, to find the exact camp. We cannot just ride in blind. It must be clean, no mistakes." Tully considered this. A clean operation sounded good. It sounded professional. It would look good in his report to Calder. "Fine, you go tonight, but at dawn, Blackhorn, you lead us in. No more tricks." Kai left. He did not go to the ridges. He went to the small, hot room he rented above the tannery. He waited until the moon was high and the drunks on the main street had quieted down. He moved like smoke through the alleys. He found Elena near the stables, saddling her horse. "He is sending me in at dawn," Kai said, his voice urgent. "He is using me to start the war." "Then we do not have until dawn," she said, her hands never stopping their work on the cinch. "Tully thinks I am scouting the ridges tonight," Kai said. "It buys us a few hours. That photograph is not enough. Tully will say it is a fake. We need something more. We need Lobo Gray. Or we need the real maps, the ones the surveyor gave you." "They are not on me," Elena said. "They are hidden." "We have to stop that posse," Kai said. The words came out hard. "I will not lead them to the spring." "We will," Elena said. She turned to face him in the dark. She was not the saloon singer. She was not the frightened woman in the alley. She was a fighter. "You bought us time, Kai. Now we use it. We have to find the proof that stops Tully before the sun comes up." Kai looked at her. He had started the day as a deputy, trying to earn back his horses. He was ending it as a conspirator, allied with a Pinkerton spy, trying to stop a war. The old man was right. The badge was just metal. The choice was what mattered. "Where do we start?" Kai asked. Elena looked toward the end of the street, where the dark, imposing shape of Ambrose Calder's private rail car sat silent and arrogant on the new tracks. "We start with the man who signs the checks." The night air, which had promised a cool reprieve, turned acrid. Kai smelled at first the sharp, resinous scent of pine burning too fast. Too hot. It was not the sweet smoke of a campfire. It was the smell of disaster. He stopped, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. Elena, moving silently beside him, froze. "What is it?" she whispered. "Smoke," he said. He looked north, toward the rail line and Calder's car, then south, toward the low hills where his people were camped. A flicker of orange licked the sky above the southern ridge. It was not a campfire. It was an inferno. "The camp," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a tone colder than the threat he felt. They ran. They left the cover of the town and sprinted across the open ground, the gravel and dried scrub crunching under their boots. The glow became a roar. When they cleared the last rise, they saw it. It was not the main camp. It was the winter storehouse, the large, low building dug into the hillside where the tribe kept the smoked meats, the dried corn, the sacks of beans. It was their survival for the cold months, and it was now a column of fire, spitting embers into the dark sky. People were running, shouting in Comanche and broken English. Women carried buckets of water from the creek. A hopeless effort. The fire was too big. Then the whispers started, spreading faster than the flames. They came from the shadows, from the white men who had gathered on the ridge to watch, the men who belonged to Tully's posse. "It is the Indians," one man yelled. "It is revenge for the stagecoach. They are burning their own stores. They are going on the warpath." The lie was instant, And it was perfect. It sealed the narrative. The Comanche were not victims. They were aggressors, destroying their own food in a fit of savage rage before they descended on the town. Kai ignored the shouts. He saw the elder, Nani, standing still, his face illuminated by the flames, watching winter burn. Then Kai heard a different sound, a small, thin cry, almost lost in the crackle of the blaze. It came from the side of the storehouse, near a small ventilation door. He did not think. He wrapped his neckerchief over his mouth and plunged into the smoke. Elena cried out, "Kai, no!" The heat was a physical blow. The smoke was thick, acrid, and black. He moved by memory, knowing the layout of the store. The cry came again. He found him, a small boy, no more than 6 years old, trapped behind a fallen stack of burning sacks. He had likely been asleep inside, guarding the stores. Kai swept the boy up. The boy was coughing, his small body rigid with terror. "We go now," Kai said in their language, his voice muffled by the cloth. He turned to exit, but the main doorway was a wall of fire. He headed for the loading entrance, the one he had used as a boy. As he neared it, his boot struck something small and hard on the dirt floor, near where the fire seemed to have started. He bent, his eyes streaming, and scooped it up. It was hot. He did not look at it. He shoved it into his pocket, kicked open the jammed loading door, and burst out into the night air, the boy in his arms. He handed the child to a weeping woman, who pulled him close. Kai staggered back, coughing, pulling the cloth from his face. That was when Sheriff Tully arrived, flanked by 2 of his men. He was not looking at the fire. He was looking at the crowd. "Clear a path," Tully bellowed. He dismounted, pushing through the Comanche, his eyes scanning the ground near the door. He bent down, as if spotting something for the first time. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying. He held up a small object. It was a silk scarf, dark blue, with a small embroidered pattern. "Looks like we found our firebug, and she was clumsy." Elena had moved to Kai's side, her hand on his arm. "Are you hurt?" "I am fine," he breathed, but he was watching Tully. Tully walked directly toward them, his eyes locked on Elena. He stopped a foot in front of her, the scarf dangling from his fingers. "Miss Serrano," Tully said, his voice slick with false courtesy. "This is a long way from the Silver Spur," taking in the local color. Elena's face was pale in the firelight, but her voice was steady. "It is a tragedy. Sheriff—" "It is a crime," Tully corrected her. He held the scarf up, letting it catch the light. "And this is evidence? Funny thing, I have seen scarves just like this on operatives from the Pinkerton Agency, the kind of folk who sneak around, cause trouble, and frame good men." The air went still. Kai felt his muscles tense. Tully was closing the trap. Elena did not flinch. She gave a short, dry laugh, a sound that surprised Kai. "Pinkerton, Sheriff, you have been reading too many dime novels. I am a performer, an artist, not a spy." She reached into the small reticule at her waist and produced a folded, official-looking document. She snapped it open. It was a passport, but not a federal one. It was a theatrical guild registry from St. Louis, complete with her photograph. "I am a singer, Sheriff," she said, her voice rising, playing to the crowd. "I travel. That scarf could belong to anyone, any performer, any traveler, perhaps," she added, her eyes narrowing. "One of the men who really started this fire dropped it, one of the men from the railroad camp. Perhaps—" Tully's face darkened. He was momentarily thrown. He had expected a denial, fear. He had not expected a counteraccusation and a plausible cover. He could not arrest her for being a singer. He snatched the passport, glanced at it, and shoved it back at her. "You watch your step, Miss Serrano." He growled, "This fire just proved those savages are hostile. The posse rides at dawn, and I will find out who you really are." He turned, barking orders at his men to secure the area, and strode back toward the town, the scarf now tucked in his own pocket. The fire was dying down, leaving a smoking, stinking ruin. The hope for winter was gone. Kai looked at Elena. He knows. He suspects, she corrected, her voice low and shaken. He cannot prove it, but he planted that scarf. He wanted to frame me, or the Pinkertons, to muddy the water. He is getting desperate. The posse, Kai said. This fire makes it worse. The town will back him now. We still have a few hours, she said. We cannot be seen together. Tully is watching me now. Go back to the saloon. Act normal. I will continue my scout. He reached into his pocket and his fingers closed around the object he had picked up in the fire. He pulled it out. It was a small copper cylinder, a blasting cap. Elena's eyes widened. Where? By the door, where it started. That is from the railroad, she whispered. That is Calder's. Kai nodded. This is the proof, but it is not enough. He looked at her attic window, high on the 3rd floor of the saloon, visible even from here. We need a signal, if I cannot come to you. He reached into his vest, into a pocket he rarely used, and pulled out a small piece of cottonwood, no bigger than his thumb. It was a hawk, carved in the Comanche style, smooth from years of his touch. I will put this on the sill of your attic window, Elena said, taking it. If it is there, it means I am safe and have information. If it is gone, it means I am in trouble, or Tully has me. If it is gone, you do not come for me. You ride, you warn the camp. I will come for you, he said, his voice hard. No, she insisted. You will save your people. That is the mission. Kai, promise me. He stared at her, the burning embers reflected in his eyes. He gave a single, reluctant nod. I have to go. I have to meet a man about my badge. She disappeared into the darkness. Kai walked back to town, the blasting cap heavy in his hand, the smell of smoke clinging to his clothes. He did not have to wait long. A man in a clean, dark suit, one of Ambrose Calder's men, intercepted him on the main street. Mr. Blackhorn, the man said, his voice polite, as if he had not just seen him covered in soot. Mr. Calder would like a word. He is in his private car. The contrast was jarring. Kai stepped from the dusty street, still smelling of ash, into a world of polished mahogany, red velvet upholstery, and cut crystal glasses. The air was thick with the expensive smoke of a Cuban cigar. Ambrose Calder sat in a high-backed leather chair. He was not a large man, but he filled the space. He wore a tailored suit, a silk vest, and a polite, almost academic smile. He looked like a banker, not a baron. Deputy Blackhorn, please, sit. A difficult night, Calder said, gesturing to the chair opposite. He poured brandy from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. A tragedy, that fire, these natives. So impulsive, destructive. Kai sat. He did not touch the glass. They did not start that fire. Calder raised an eyebrow, handing him the brandy. No, Tully's report seemed quite clear. A revenge ritual, he called it. He sipped his own drink. But that is why I asked you here. Tully is a blunt instrument. He sees a problem. He hits it with a hammer. He has no finesse. This territory, this entire expansion, it requires a more delicate hand. He leaned forward, his smile becoming confidential. You, Kai, you have finesse. You are a man who understands both worlds. You know the land, you know the people, and you wear the badge. You are a pragmatist. What do you want, Mr. Calder? Calder smiled. Direct. I like that. I'm prepared to offer you a new position. Not as a deputy, as chief of security for the entire Calder mining and rail concern. Your pay would be triple what the federal government offers. A $10,000 bonus upon signing. He let the numbers hang in the quiet, opulent air. $10,000. It was more than enough to buy back his horses, It was enough to buy a ranch. "And my duties?" Kai asked. "Simple," Calder said, swirling his brandy. "Stability? The investors back east are nervous. They hear about stagecoach attacks, burning storehouses. They need to be reassured. Sheriff Tully is insistent on this posse. He wants to ride at dawn. He believes, and I'm inclined to agree, that the tribe at Spirit Spring is the source of this instability." He pulled a folded document from his desk. "This is an order. It certifies the area as hostile, under the provisions of the treaty. It allows for the immediate relocation of the tribe to the reservation lands further south. It clears the way for us to secure the area, to protect our assets, and to bring prosperity to Red Bluff." He slid the paper and a pen across the table. "All it requires is your signature. As the federal presence, and as a Comanche yourself, your certification makes it legal. It makes it clean. No war, just relocation. A neat, orderly solution." Kai looked at the paper. He looked at the man. He thought of the burning food. He thought of the small boy, gasping for air. He thought of the copper blasting cap in his pocket. "My people will not leave the Spirit Spring," Kai said. "It is sacred, and I will not sign a lie." He pushed the paper back. Ambrose Calder's smile did not waver, but his eyes went flat and cold, like stones at the bottom of a river. "A pity," he said. He took a long, slow drink of his brandy. "You misunderstand your position, Deputy," Calder said, his voice quiet, all pretense of friendship gone. "You think that badge belongs to the federal government. You think it represents justice." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "It does not. It represents power. And in this territory, I am the power. I pay for the telegraph lines that send the reports. I employ the men who build the tracks. I employ Sheriff Tully. That badge you wear, it belongs to the man who pays for it. And I am that man." He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "You are either on my payroll, Deputy Blackhorn, or you are in my way. You have until dawn to reconsider. Tully rides with or without your signature, but your signature makes it tidy. Think about it." Kai stood. "There is nothing to think about." He turned and left the car, stepping back out into the cold, smoky air of the real world. The threat was absolute. The offer was the last bribe before the violence. He knew he could not stop Tully in the town. He was one man, and the town was a mob. He had to stop Lobo Gray. He had to find the arsenal. Tully thought he was scouting. He would use the time. He avoided the streets, moving through the darkness toward the high ridges, toward the sacred lands. He knew these hills better than any man. He knew the tracks Lobo Gray's men would use, the hidden canyons, the old smugglers' routes. He found the trail near the dry wash, just as Tully had claimed. But it was not a Comanche trail. It was heavy laden. Mules, shod horses. They were trying to hide the tracks, but they were amateurs. Kai followed them, not to the Spirit Spring, but to a series of limestone caves nearby, a place the Comanche called the Place of Bad Spirits. He slid from his horse, moving like a ghost. He heard no guards. He slipped inside the mouth of the largest cave. The air was cool and still. He struck a single match. The small flame illuminated a nightmare. Crates, dozens of them, stacked high. They were not filled with mining equipment. He pried one open with his knife. Rifles, brand new Winchesters, still coated in packing grease. Boxes of ammunition, crates of dynamite. And in the back, covered by a tarp, was a Gatling gun. He saw more copper blasting caps, scattered on a crate, identical to the one in his pocket. This was Lobo Gray's arsenal. This was Calder's war. They were not planning to stop the Comanche. They were planning to slaughter them. And they had been stalking this cave for weeks. The match burned down, searing his fingers, and he dropped it. He stood in the absolute darkness. He heard Calder's voice again. "Your badge belongs to the man who pays for it." He touched the piece of tin on his chest. It had never felt so heavy or so worthless. He had tried to walk the line between two worlds. He saw now that there was no line. There was only Calder's world, and the world of his people. He made a silent vow. There in the dark, if the law was for sale, he would not be the one to wear it. He would stop the posse. He would stop Calder, but he would not do it as a deputy. Dawn was less than 3 hours away. The dawn was a smear of bruised purple and gray. Kai Blackhorn moved from the arsenal cave, the copper blasting cap a cold, hard lump in his pocket. He was a man running out of time, wearing a badge that felt like a betrayal. He rode hard, not to the ridges as he had promised Tully, but to the camp at Spirit Spring. He was too late. The posse was already there. 30 men, drunk on whiskey and self-righteousness, led by Sheriff Tully. They were not attacking. Not yet. Calder's orders had likely changed. The mine baron still wanted Kai's signature. He wanted the clean, legal theft. So, this was not a massacre. It was a search, an act of profound intimidation. Kai rode into the camp, his face a mask of stone. Tully, sitting on his fat horse, grinned. "Glad you could join us. Deputy, we are just conducting a search for the stolen survey maps, under federal authority." Kai could do nothing. He was one man, and he was still, officially, one of them. He watched as Tully's men tore the camp apart. They kicked over drying racks, ripped open medicine bags, scattered the winter-dried corn, what little was left after the fire. They dumped sacred pollen onto the dirt. Laughing, he saw the boy he had rescued from the fire, watching him. The boy's eyes were full of confusion. "You wear their metal. Why do you let them do this?" When it was over, Tully's men mounted, their bags filled with small, stolen treasures. "Nothing," Tully announced loudly. "They must have moved the maps to a war party. We will be back, Blackhorn. Tell your people that." They rode off, leaving the wreckage behind. Kai dismounted. His hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so cold it burned. He began, wordlessly, to pick up the scattered items. The elder, Nani, came and stood beside him. He placed a hand on a ripped buffalo hide. "You tried to walk their path," Nani said, his voice quiet. He was not angry. "You see where it leads." "I have to stop him," Kai said, his voice thick. "You cannot stop him as a deputy," Nani said. "You cannot stop him as a Comanche. You must be something else. Something in between." He looked up at the sky, where the morning hawk was already circling. "The path of honor. Kiona, it may have no certificate, but the eyes of the ancestors. Are you ready to walk it?" Kai met the old man's gaze. "I am." That night, he worked. He did not tell Tully. He moved under the cover of the new moon. He gathered the women, the children, and the elders. He took them, not south to the reservation, but high into the hidden canyons, to the old cliff dwellings his people had not used in 100 years. They were safe. They were invisible. He left a handful of young warriors at the camp, a skeleton crew, to make it look occupied. The trap was set. While Kai moved his people, Elena Serrano was moving hers. She saw the small, carved hawk on her attic windowsill. Kai was alive. He was working. It was her turn. She could not break into Calder's car again. She had to be invited. She put on the best dress she owned, a dark blue velvet that made her skin look like porcelain. She went to the saloon, but not to work. She sent a note to Ambrose Calder's private car. "Mr. Calder, as a businesswoman in this town, I am terrified by these attacks, the fire. Sheriff Tully seems overwhelmed. I would feel so much safer if I could appeal to you, as the true authority in Red Bluff, for protection." It was a gamble. It was a performance. Calder was a man who loved power, but more than that, he loved to be seen as the power. An hour later, his polite, suit-wearing man came to the saloon. "Mr. Calder would be delighted if you would join him for dinner. Tonight, 8 o'clock. She had her invitation. Kai, meanwhile, needed his own. He could not fight Lobo Gray's army. He had to get inside it. He knew of a man, a tracker named Snake Finney. Snake was half white, half Kiowa. and he had no loyalty to anyone but the man who paid him last. He sometimes ran supplies for Lobo's crew. Kai found him in the back of a canvas-walled den, reeking of cheap whiskey. Kai sat opposite him, placing his service revolver on the table. "I am out, Snake," Kai said. Snake laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "Out, you are the law. Blackhorn." "The law is a joke," Kai said. He pushed a stack of coins across the table. It was $30, a significant piece of his horse money. "Calder is taking everything. I want in on the real score. Lobo Gray is hitting everything. I want my cut." Snake stopped laughing. He looked at the money, then at Kai's face. He saw the cold rage. He saw the badge. "This is a trick. This is a business proposition." Kai said, "I am tired of getting $10 a week to watch men like Calder get rich. I am a better tracker than anyone Lobo has. I am a better shot. I want to meet him." Snake considered it. A Comanche deputy turning on the law. It was a good story, and it was believable. Lobo does not meet people, but his lieutenant, a man named Jax, is at the old relay station tomorrow. Noon. If you are lying, he will kill you. "I will be there," Kai said. The next day, the wind picked up. By 11 o'clock, the sky was a sickly yellow. A sandstorm was brewing. Kai rode to the relay station, a ruined adobe building in the middle of a barren plain. Snake was there, with 3 other men. One of them, Jax, was a big man with a busted nose and a cold smile. "So, the deputy wants to change sides." Jax sneered. "Tully finally stopped paying you." "Tully is a fool," Kai said. "He works for Calder for scraps. The real money is in the silver and in the guns." Jax's smile vanished. "What guns?" "The ones in the cave. The Gatling gun," Kai said. Silence. Snake took a step back. "I did not tell him. I swear." "You are a dead man. Blackhorn," Jax growled, his hand dropping to his pistol. The world exploded. The sandstorm hit like a solid wall. The sky went black. Wind screamed, and the air filled with stinging, blinding grit. Kai had been waiting for it. He dove to the side as Jax fired, the shot muffled by the roar of the wind. He rolled, pulling his own gun. He could not see. He could only hear. A man cursed to his left. He fired. He was fighting blind. Grit in his teeth. His eyes sealed shut. Someone tackled him. He and the man rolled, punching, choking in the dirt. He slammed his pistol butt against the man's head, and the man went limp. He scrambled to his feet, trying to get his bearings. He was deaf and blind. He sensed movement in front of him. He wiped his eyes, hissing as the sand scraped his cornea. Through the yellow-black murk, he saw Jax, 10 feet away. Jax was raising his rifle, his face a mask of sand and hate. Kai knew he was too slow. A flash. It was not a gunshot. It was a pinpoint of brilliant, white light. It came from a high ridge, 200 yards away. It hit Jax square in the eyes. Jax cried out, momentarily blinded, and his shot went wide. It was all the time Kai needed. He did not fire to kill. He fired at Jax's knee. The man screamed and collapsed. Kai did not wait. He ran to his horse, mounted, and rode into the heart of the storm. He knew what that light was. A mirror. Elena, she had followed him. She had been watching his back. The storm crippled Red Bluff for a day. It knocked down the new telegraph lines. When the line was finally repaired, the first message came clicking through. It was not from Calder, or from the east. It was from the next territory over, a town called Stone Creek. Settler family massacred. Entire family killed and scalped. Comanche war party blamed. Army post at Fort Griffin has been alerted. Troops are mobilizing. It was a lie. Kai knew it. Stone Creek was 50 miles away, and his people were in the cliffs. But the lie was perfect. It was the justification Calder needed. The massacre would bring the army. It would validate Tully's posse. It would silence all questions. That night, Elena sat opposite Ambrose Calder. His private car was an island of quiet luxury in the howling wind. He was charming. He poured her wine. He spoke of art, of cities, of the future he was building. "This land is empty, Miss Serrano," he said, gesturing to the storm outside. "It is savage. My railroad, my mines. We are taming it. We are bringing civilization. It is a noble calling." "It is a powerful one," she said, her voice full of admiration. She played the part. She was impressed. "But it must be so dangerous. The fire, the attacks." "One must be firm," he said, "for the greater good." She excused herself. She knew she had only minutes. She did not go to the main desk. She went to a smaller, private study. The lock was simple. She had it open in 10 seconds. She sifted through his papers. She did not find the main account ledger, but she found something better. A locked receipts drawer. She picked that. 2. Inside was a thin ledger, a bill of sale from a gunsmith in St. Joseph, for 1 Gatling gun, for 50 crates of Winchester rifles, for 100,000 rounds of ammunition, all billed to a shell company, the Red Bluff Development Corporation. She had him. She tucked the receipt into her dress and returned to the dinner. Calder was smiling, unsuspecting. Later, in the dark alley, the wind still howling, Kai met her. The tension between them was thick. "I saw you," he said, his voice low. "At his window, you were smiling, laughing with him. You looked comfortable in his world." The jealousy was raw, and it surprised him. She did not back down. She was cold, tired, and angry. "And you are still wearing that badge," she shot back. "Tully's men tore your camp apart. They humiliated your people. And you stood there. You let them. Are you his man, Kai, or are you ours?" The accusations hung in the air, both true, both unfair. Before he could answer, they heard a noise, a groan, from behind a stack of barrels. Kai moved first, his gun out. It was not one of Lobo's men. It was a Chinese railroad worker, a man Kai had seen around the labor camp. He was huddled, beaten, his face bloody. "2 men," the worker whispered in broken English. "White men said I stole water." Kai recognized the description. It was 2 of Lobo's men, the ones who hung around Tully's office. This was not a robbery. It was sport. The old Kai would have arrested them, would have filed a report Tully would ignore. Kai holstered his pistol. He helped the man up. The man's name was Wu. "Go," Kai said to Elena. "Get the receipt safe." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Something the law will not," he said. He found the 2 men in the Silver Spur, bragging about teaching the rat-eater a lesson. Kai did not speak. He walked up to the first man and hit him in the throat. The man collapsed, gagging. The second man went for his gun. Kai was faster. He broke the man's wrist over the edge of the bar, then hit him once, hard, in the solar plexus. The fight was over in 5 seconds. He did not arrest them. He left them wheezing on the floor and walked out. He had crossed a line. He had used violence, not law. And he felt no regret. He had found an ally. Wu and his hundreds of laborers were treated like animals by Calder. Now, they had a reason to fight back. Kai met Elena on the saloon roof, under the howling wind. The carved hawk was in his hand. "They are moving up the ceremony," she said, shouting over the wind. "The fake massacre report. Calder is using it. He has invited the press, investors, a territorial politician. It is in 2 days. He is calling it the laying of the last ray. He is going to announce his claim on the Spirit Spring. He will use the army, the massacre, and that Gatling gun to make it all legal." Kai looked at the town, at the single light burning in Calder's car. "He is building a stage." "Yes," Elena said, her eyes fierce. "He is inviting an audience to watch him steal your land and justify a war." "Good," Kai said, the wind tearing at his hair. "Let them come. Let them watch." He looked at her. "We will give them a different show. We will use his own stage to hang him." The plan was set, but the pieces were still in motion. The laying of the last ray ceremony was a day and a half away. It was a deadline, hard and final. While Kai Blackhorn worked his side, Elena Serrano had to secure the paper. The bill of sale for the Gatling gun was good. The tintype photograph was better, but the land contracts were the foundation of the entire conspiracy. She targeted the Red Bluff Land Registry Office. It was a small, brick-fronted building that held the legal soul of the county. It was where the theft was laundered into law. She waited until 2 o'clock in the morning, when the town was deep in its whiskey-soaked sleep. The lock on the back door was heavy, but old. It yielded to her tools in under a minute. She moved in darkness, a small oil lamp in her hand. The flame turned down to a mere slit of light. The air was stale, smelling of paper and dried ink. She found the ledgers. Calder, The entries were meticulous. She began taking photographs with a small, custom-built camera the Pinkerton agency had provided. It was a slow process. Plate, exposure. Plate, exposure. She found the contracts for the land near the Spirit Spring. Her blood ran cold. The signatures were clumsy, forced. The payments were a joke. $10 for 100 acres. $5 for a spring. All marked, paid in full. Some were signed with a simple X, witnessed by Sheriff Tully. This was not just fraud. It was a record of extortion, of terror. She captured a dozen plates, her hands working with steady, practiced speed. At the same time, miles away, Kai was hunting. He was not hunting Lobo. He was hunting the surveyor, the nervous, sweating man who had given Elena the first map. The man's name was Hobbs. Kai knew men like Hobbs. He was a weak man caught in a strong machine. He was terrified of Calder, but he was also terrified of what he knew. Hobbs would run. Kai did not find him in his rented room. He did not find him at the saloon. He found him at the livery, trying to buy a horse for cash in the middle of the night. "You are leaving, Mr. Hobbs?" Kai asked, stepping out of the shadows of a stall. Hobbs let out a small, terrified squeak. He dropped his saddlebag. "Blackhorn, I do not know anything. I just want to go. I want to go home." "You are not going anywhere," a new voice said. It came from the livery entrance. 2 of Lobo Gray's men stepped inside, blocking the only way out. They were not the same men Kai had beaten at the saloon. These men were killers. "Mr. Calder is very unhappy you lost that map. He wants to talk to you." Hobbs was paralyzed, his face chalky with fear. "He is not going with you," Kai said. He did not move his hands toward his gun. "Stay out of this, deputy," the first man sneered. "This is private business." "You are on town land," Kai said, his voice cold. "That makes it my business, or it makes it your grave, your choice." The man laughed. He drew his pistol. Kai moved. He did not draw. He dove forward, grabbing Hobbs by the shirt and pulling him down behind a water trough. Just as the first shot boomed in the enclosed space, the bullet splintered the wood where they had been standing. "Run," Kai yelled at Hobbs, shoving him toward the back wall. "There is a loose board. Go!" Kai drew his own revolver, firing twice, not at the men, but at the lantern hanging above their heads. The barn plunged into darkness as the lantern shattered, spilling burning oil onto the hay below. The men cursed, firing blind into the darkness. Hobbs scrambled, found the loose board, and was gone. Fire began to lick up the dry hay. "He is gone," one of the men yelled. "Get the map! Kill the Indian!" Kai was already moving. He vaulted over the stall, the firelight painting the scene in leaping, demonic shadows. He hit the first man low, his shoulder driving into the man's stomach, sending him crashing into a stall. The second man turned, his gun flashing, but Kai was already on top of him, his knife hand rising and falling. A clean, silent strike. The first man was scrambling, his gun lost in the hay. Kai hit him once, at the base of the skull. The man went limp. The livery was burning. Kai ran. He found Hobbs a block away, gasping for air, shaking so hard he could barely stand. "I cannot go back," Hobbs panted. "No," Kai agreed. He grabbed the front of the man's shirt. "Where is the real map? The one you showed Elena. The original." I burned it. I was scared." Kai's grip tightened. "You are lying." "It is in my boot," Hobbs cried, his voice breaking. "Taped to my leg. Here, just let me go. I will ride. I will never come back." Kai ripped the man's pant leg up. A folded oilcloth packet was taped to his calf. Kai tore it free. It was the map, the true surveyor's map, showing the massive silver lode directly under the spirit spring. "Take my horse," Kai said, shoving the man toward the shadows where his mount was tied. "Ride east. Do not stop until you hit the ocean." Hobbs did not need to be told twice. He scrambled into the saddle and was gone. Kai stood alone, the map in his hand. He had the arsenal. Elena had the gun receipts. Now he had the motive. They had all the pieces. The bell started to ring. Fire at the livery. He did not have all the pieces. He had made a mistake. He looked down at the two men. He had not just beaten them. In the heat of the fight, his knife strike, one of them was dead. The other was unconscious, but alive. He had just killed one of Lobo Gray's men, and he was still wearing his badge. He ran. He could not go to his room. He could not go to the saloon. He went to the rocks, the high ground, the places he knew. He had to wait. He had to think. He did not have to wait long. Sheriff Tully found the scene at the livery. The fire was put out, but the body was found. The other man, the one with the broken wrist and the concussion, was now telling a wild story. By sunrise, Red Bluff was plastered with new posters. Wanted, for murder and treason. Kiona Kai Blackhorn, known associate of hostile Comanche forces, $500, dead or alive. The propaganda machine had turned, faster than he could have imagined. He was no longer the tame Indian. He was the savage who had betrayed them. He had murdered a white citizen and burned the livery. The massacre at Stone Creek was his doing. He was the leader of the hostile war party. He was trapped. He was hiding in the rocks above Red Bluff, watching the town he had tried to protect turn into a nest of vipers. He needed to get to Elena. He needed to show her the map. He waited until night. He moved, not as a man, but as a shadow, staying off the ridges, using the dry creek beds. He made it to the edge of town. He saw the silver spur. It was lit up, but there were armed men on the street. Tully's men, watching it. They were watching her. He could not go in. He circled to the back. He found a loose stone in the foundation, a place he and Elena had designated. He slipped a small, dark hawk feather under it and tapped twice. An hour passed. He was cramped, cold, and hunted. Then, a section of the ground itself seemed to open. A cellar door, hidden under a stack of old tarps, grated open. Elena's hand emerged. "Kai!" He slipped inside. She bolted the door behind him. The air was cool, damp, smelling of earth and old apples. A single lantern cast a low glow. He was breathing hard, the adrenaline fading, leaving him exhausted. He saw her face. She was pale, her eyes wide. "They are saying you are a murderer," she whispered. "I am," he said. He looked at his hands. "I killed one of them. At the livery. I was saving Hobbs." Hobbs, the surveyor. He pulled the oilcloth map from his shirt. He had it, the real one. Elena unrolled it on a barrelhead. Her breath caught. "This is it. This is everything. The proof of the motive. The blasting cap proves the means. The photographs prove the conspiracy. We have it, Kai." She looked at him. He was not the confident deputy. He was a hunted man. He had a shallow graze on his arm from the canyon. He had not even told her about the canyon. "Tully," she asked. "He was waiting for me. After the livery, he must have known I would run for the high ground." Kai spoke, his voice flat. He and 6 men, they pinned me in the narrow canyon. They thought they had me. How did you get out? A faint, hard smile touched his lips. I know that canyon. I know the Mustangs that run it. I have been leaving them salt licks for 2 years. They know my whistle. I did not call them. I startled them. A single shot into the rock above their den. A herd of 50 wild horses, coming through a canyon that narrow. Tully's men were lucky to get out alive. They were not worried about me. He had used the wild, the very thing they accused him of being, to save himself. Elena reached out, touching the graze on his arm. Her fingers were gentle. You are hurt. It is nothing, he said, but he did not pull away. She began to clean the wound with whiskey and a clean cloth. They were close, in the small, dark space. The air was thick with their shared danger. They will not stop looking for you, she said, her voice low. You cannot go back up there. She pointed to a dark corner of the cellar, where a rough-hewn passage disappeared into the earth. This is how I get in and out. This is how I moved my camera. It is one of the old Gold Rush tunnels. It connects to 3 other buildings, and it leads out, a mile into the desert. It is your way out, if you need it, Ede. He looked at the tunnel, then back at her. If we need it, she corrected. She finished wrapping his arm. Her hands lingered. My father was a miner, she said, her voice quiet, the words coming from a deep place. Not like Calder, a real miner, with a pick and hope. He came to California in '49. He believed in the railroad. He said it was the spine of the country, that it would bring families and schools. He bought a small claim, a good one. She looked away at the dark, damp stone walls. A man like Calder came, a man with lawyers and bought judges. He said my father's claim was invalid. He used paper and threats to take it. My father fought him. He lost everything. He died in a rented room in Sacramento, broke and confused. He never understood how they could just take it. She turned back to Kai, her eyes shining with a fierce, controlled light. When the Pinkertons offered me this job, I thought it was just a job, a way to use my anger. But this is not for my father. This is for your people. This is for the men like Wu. Calder is not building a spine. He is a parasite, and he is wrapping himself in the flag and the law to do it. Kai listened. He saw the truth in her, the core of her strength. It matched his. He reached up, his fingers touching the rim of the tin badge on his vest. When I first took this, he said, his voice rough, I thought it was a shield, for me, for my people, a way to walk in their world, to use their power. But Calder was right. It does not belong to me. It belongs to the men who pay. It has not been a shield. It has been a chain. It made me stand and watch while Tully's men tore up my home. He met her eyes. I am done with it. When this is over, this metal is going back into the dirt. If I have to choose between my soul and this badge, I choose my soul. I choose my people. Elena's breath hitched. This was his confession, his final alignment. Before she could speak, a frantic scratching sound came from the cellar door, a coded knock. Elena unbolted it. One of the saloon girls. Sadie tumbled in, her face pale. Elena, I heard them. Tully, and that Lobo Gray, they were in the back room. They were not even whispering. They were drunk. They were celebrating. Celebrating what? Elena demanded. The bridge, Sadie panted. The new railroad bridge, over the canyon, the one for the ceremony. They are going to blow it up. Kai and Elena stared at each other. They are going to blow up Calder's bridge. Kai was confused. No, Sadie said, shaking her head. They said the timing had to be perfect, right after Calder and the politician finished their speeches. They said, it will be the final proof, an attack, right in front of the press. It will give the army no choice but to clean out the whole valley. They are going to blow up the bridge, with the train on it, and blame your people. The pieces slammed into place. The laying of the last ray was the final act. Calder would get his land. The press would have their story, and the army would have their war. A perfect, bloody circle. Kai looked at Elena. The hunted look was gone. In its place was a cold, pure certainty. He knew his path. He was no longer a deputy. He was a warrior. He reached out, his hand touching her cheek. His fingers were rough, stained with dirt and gunpowder. "If we get through tomorrow's sunrise," he said, "we will talk about a future." Elena leaned into his hand, closing her eyes for just a second. "Tomorrow's sunrise," she promised. The night of the ceremony was a fever dream. Red Bluff had transformed. Bunting, red, white, and blue, hung limply from every awning, the colors looking garish and false under the glare of torches and new electric lights strung by Calder's men. A platform had been built next to the new, skeletal railroad bridge that spanned the deep canyon. Ambrose Calder was there, looking like a king, surrounded by reporters from as far away as Chicago, a sleepy-looking territorial politician, and a gaggle of thin, nervous investors. The whole town had turned out. They were drinking free whiskey, courtesy of Calder, their faces flushed with greed and excitement. They were celebrating their own glorious future, built on the edge of a war they had been tricked into demanding. Sheriff Tully stood near the platform, his hand resting on his pistol, his eyes scanning the crowd. He was no longer just a sheriff. He was the guardian of the new order. Hidden in the rocks above the canyon, Lobo Gray's men were in position. They were not watching the speeches. They were watching the bridge supports, where the dynamite was already wired. Kai and Elena moved through the secret tunnel, emerging into the damp, cold air of the desert, a mile from the town. This was where they split. "He will have his private car guarded," Kai said, his voice low, "but he will be on the platform, making his speech. That is your window. The real ledgers, the bribery accounts, they will be in the safe in his car. You have the receipt for the Gatling gun. You have the photographs of the land contracts. We need the money trail. Elena, we need the book that connects him to Tully and Lobo." "I know," she said. She was dressed in dark, practical clothes, her hair tucked under a cap. "You, the bridge, they will be guarding the dynamite." "I am counting on it." He looked at her, the torchlight from the distant ceremony catching the fierce determination in her eyes. "Be safe." "You be smart," she replied. "I will meet you back at the tunnel entrance when it is done." She disappeared into the darkness, circling wide toward the rail yard. Kai turned toward the canyon. He did not move like a man. He moved like the Comanche he was, using the gullies, the shadows, the noise of the drunken crowd to cover his approach. Elena reached the rail yard. It was quiet. Most of the workers, even the guards, had drifted toward the ceremony. Calder's car, the Olympus, sat dark and silent. A single guard stood by the steps. Elena did not go to the guard. She went to the other side of the car, where she had scouted the lock on the baggage car door. It was a simple freight lock. She was through it in 30 seconds. She was inside, in the dark, moving through the plush, silent cars. She bypassed the dining room, the velvet-lined sitting room. She went to his private office. The door was locked. This lock was better. It took her almost 3 minutes. She slipped inside. The room was dark. She lit a tiny, shielded match, just long in to spot the safe, hidden behind a heavy mahogany panel. She got to work. Her fingers, sensitive and practiced, manipulated the dial. She could hear the faint sound of Ambrose Calder's voice beginning his speech, carried on the wind. Back at the canyon, Kai had found the first sentry. The man was leaning against a rock, staring at the bright lights of the party, his rifle cradled in his arm. Kai came from above, a silent, falling shadow. His hand covered the man's mouth. His knife found the ribs. It was silent, brutal, and necessary. He lowered the man to the ground. "One down," He saw the others. 3 more, near the main support pillar on the far side of the bridge. They were gathered around the detonator box, the wire snaking up to the charges. As he began to move, the sky, which had been clear and cold, changed. The wind shifted, and the first drop of rain, cold and heavy, struck his face, then another, and another. A cold, unseasonable drizzle was beginning to fall. He was 20 yards from the bombers when a voice cut through the sound of the rain. "I knew you could not stay away. Blackhorn." Kai froze. Sheriff Tully stepped out from behind a large boulder, his shotgun leveled at Kai's chest. "I knew you would come for the bridge. It is your last play, is not it?" 2 more deputies emerged from the rocks, flanking Tully. They had him. "It is over." Tully sneered, the rain beginning to plaster his hair to his wide, flat face. "Calder was right. You are predictable. And you are a murderer." "Tully," Kai said, his voice quiet. He did not raise his hands. "I am a pioneer," Tully said. "Now, drop the gun." Inside the rail car, the safe clicked. Elena pulled the heavy door open, and she found it, the main ledger, the private account book. Her hands sifted through it. Payments to T. Tully, to L. Gray. Payments for security. Land acquisition. Supply. It was all here. She grabbed the book. She grabbed the bundles of cash that were sitting next to it. She had everything. "I would not take those if I were you." Elena's blood turned to ice. She spun around. Ambrose Calder was standing in the doorway. He was not on the platform. He was here. He held a small, pearl-handled derringer, and it was pointed at her heart. "I must admit," Calder said, his voice calm, almost academic. "I did not expect a saloon singer. I thought you were just a distraction for the deputy. But the lock on my office, that was professional. Pinkerton, I presume." Elena's mind raced. She was caught. "You were supposed to be making a speech." "I have men to make speeches for me," Calder said. He stepped into the room. "I have been watching you for a week. Miss Serrano. Ever since Tully suspected you. You are very good, but you are, after all, just a woman." He gestured with the small pistol. "Put the ledger down. We have a problem. You have my property, and I—" He reached into his desk. "Have yours." He pulled out a stack of photographs. He tossed them on the desk. They were pictures of her. Pictures of her meeting the surveyor. Pictures of her picking the lock on the land office. Pictures of her talking to Kai in the alley. "My men are not just thugs," Calder said. "They are diligent. If you release your information, I will release mine. A saloon singer, a Pinkerton spy, consorting with a known Indian murderer, breaking into federal offices, fabricating evidence against a pillar of the community. Who do you think the press will believe, especially after that bridge goes up?" It was a perfect trap. Her evidence against his, her word against his. At the bridge, the rain was turning to a slick, cold downpour. The ground was becoming mud. "Now, Kai," Tully said, "the gun." Kai dropped his gun. It landed with a soft thud in the mud. "Good boy." Tully grinned. He gestured to one of his deputies. "Cuff him." As the deputy moved forward, fumbling with the irons, Kai saw a flicker of movement on the ridge above Tully. A dozen shadows, silhouetted against the dark, stormy sky. The Chinese laborers, led by Wu. They were armed with mining picks and shovels, and on the other flank, a second group, the Mexican miners who worked Calder's other claim, the ones Kai had shared his water with, the ones who had seen him save Hobbs. They did not make a sound, they just appeared. Tully, his back to the ridge, saw Kai's eyes flicker. He started to turn. "Now!" Kai roared. He did not attack Tully. He dove, shoulder first, at the deputy with the cuffs, driving him back. The world exploded. Wu and his men let out a yell, a sound from deep in the chest, and charged down the slick rocks. Tully spun, his shotgun blasting. But he was too late. The first wave of workers hit his deputies. It was not a gunfight. It was a brawl. It was pick handles against pistol butts, shovels against rifles. It was raw, brutal, and desperate. Kai tackled the deputy, his hands slipping on the man's wet slicker. He slammed his fist into the man's face. He heard a yell. Sheriff Tully was free, ignoring the workers, running, not to the fight. He was running to the detonator box. "No!" Kai screamed. He scrambled to his feet, slipping in the mud. Tully reached the box. He grinned at Kai, a broken-toothed, terrible expression. "You lose, Indian!" He slammed his hand down on the plunger. Nothing happened. Tully's eyes went wide. He slammed it again, and again. Kai saw it then. One of Yu's men, a small, fast man, had reached the box first. In the chaos, he had ripped the wires free from the terminals. Tully roared, a sound of pure animal rage. He threw the useless box aside. He pulled his revolver. But he was not aiming at Kai. He was aiming at the wires. He fired. The bullet sparked against the rock. He was trying to hit the blasting caps. One of the bombers, the one Kai had not seen, recovered. He saw what Tully was doing. He pulled a match from a waterproof case, struck it, and touched it to the long, tar-coated fuse that led directly to the main charge. The fuse sputtered, hissed, and caught. A bright, sizzling spark began to race toward the bridge support. "Get back!" Kai yelled at the workers. "It is lit!" The men scrambled, falling over each other in the mud and the dark. Kai ran. He ran toward the burning fuse. Tully fired at him, the bullet whining past his ear. Kai did not slow. He slid the last 10 feet on his knees, through mud and rock, his hands outstretched. The fuse was burning fast. He had seconds. He had no knife. He did not have time. He reached the fuse, a foot from the dynamite. He grabbed the burning, sizzling cord with his bare hand. The pain was immediate, white-hot and absolute. The tar and black powder seared his palm, burning to the bone. He did not let go. He held the fuse, crushing it, smothering the flame with his own flesh, his teeth gritted, a low groan tearing from his throat. The fuse went out. He collapsed, his left hand a ruined, smoking claw. The bridge was safe. In the rail car, Ambrose Calder smiled at his checkmate. "So, Miss Serrano, what will it be your silence for mine?" Elena looked at the ledger in her hand. She looked at the damning photographs on his desk. He had her. Then, a new sound. A crash. The door to the car was kicked open. Lobo Gray stood there, his clothes soaked, his face a mask of fury. "Tully's down," he yelled at Calder. "The bridge is a bust. The whole thing is blown. The Chinks and the miners. They came out of the hills. It was the Indian. It was Blackhorn." Calder's polite mask shattered. "What gets your men? Get the Gatling gun." "My men are scattered," Lobo snarled. "And Blackhorn has the map, the real one. He took it off Hobbs." Calder's eyes darted from Lobo to Elena. He saw the ledger in her hand. "You!" he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. "This was you!" Lobo Gray saw her, too. He saw the ledger. He did not wait for an order. He moved, faster than Calder, faster than Elena could react. He slammed his pistol against the side of her head. Elena crumpled to the floor, the ledger scattering from her hands. Kai was on his feet, his burned hand wrapped in his neckerchief, the pain a dull, sickening thunder. The fight was over. Tully and his deputies were bound, tied up by the victorious miners. Wu was giving quiet orders. Then Kai heard the shout, "Blackhorn!" He looked up. On the platform, lit by the electric lights, stood Lobo Gray. He had Elena. He had his arm locked around her throat, a pistol pressed to her temple. She was conscious, but dazed, a dark line of blood trickling from her hairline. Ambrose Calder stood beside them, his composure regained. Sheriff Tully, now unbound, had joined them, along with 2 of Lobo's men who had been in the crowd. They had the high ground. They had the hostage. "Well?" Deputy Calder called out, his voice smooth, projecting over the rain-soaked crowd, who were now watching in stunned, terrified silence. "A dramatic evening. You have caused a great deal of trouble." "Let her go, Calder!" Kai yelled, his voice raw. "Of course," Calder said pleasantly. "A simple trade. The map, Mr. Blackhorn. The real surveyor's map that you stole from my man Hobbs. You give that to me, and you get her." Lobo pressed the gun harder against Elena's head. She winced. Kai stood in the mud. The miners had fallen silent behind him. The reporters were scribbling, their faces pale. "Do not do it, Kai," Elena managed, her voice weak. "Shut up," Lobo snarled. Kai looked at the map in his vest pocket. He looked at Elena. He looked at Calder, the man who had bought the law, and Tully, the man who wore it. He thought of his people. He thought of the spirit spring. The map was the only thing protecting it. It was the only proof. "A simple trade, Blackhorn," Calder called. "Paper for a person seems fair to me. What does your law say about that?" Kai looked at the tin star on his chest. It was caked in mud, its shine gone. It was a joke, a heavy metal lie. "My law," Kai said, his voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence. "My law says you do not trade people. Not for paper, not for anything." He reached up, his fingers fumbling with the pin. He tore the badge from his vest. He held it up for all of them to see. Calder, Tully, the press. Then, with a movement of pure, final disgust, he threw the badge. It sailed in a high, slow arc and landed in the deep mud at the foot of the platform. It disappeared. "I am not a deputy," Kai called out, his voice ringing through the canyon. "I am just a man, and you will not have her, and you will not have the map." He looked at Tully, at Calder, at Lobo. "You want her, you will have to come through me, and through all of us." Behind him, in the rain, Wu and the miners, the Mexican laborers, they stepped forward, picks and shovels raised. They formed a silent, muddy, and defiant line. The standoff stretched, a string pulled taut in the cold. Driving rain. Kai Blackhorn stood in the mud, his hand naked, his badge gone. Opposite him, on the platform, Ambrose Calder's face was a mask of cold fury, while Lobo Gray's arm remained locked around Elena Serrano's throat, the pistol pressed to her temple. The crowd of reporters and townspeople was a silent, terrified mass. Behind Kai, the line of miners and railroad workers held. They were a wall of desperation, armed with picks and shovels, soaked to the skin, but unmoving. "This is your last chance, Blackhorn," Calder shouted, his voice cutting through the hiss of the rain. "The map, or she dies, and then your rabble joins her." Lobo cocked the hammer of his pistol. The click was painfully loud. Kai looked at Wu. He gave a single, sharp nod. Wu did not hesitate. He let out a yell, a high-pitched cry in Cantonese, and his men surged forward. They did not charge to attack, they charged to create chaos. They fanned out, a wave of muddy, determined bodies, their shovels and picks raised. The investors and reporters on the platform screamed and scrambled backward. In that single, chaotic second, Elena moved. She was not a damsel. She was a Pinkerton. She drove the heel of her boot down, grinding it into Lobo Gray's instep with all her weight. Lobo roared, his grip instinctively loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all Kai needed. He was not running at Lobo. He was running to Elena. He launched himself up the muddy embankment, grabbing her wrist. "Now!" he yelled. Lobo fired. The shot went wild, the bullet screaming past Kai's head. Tully was shouting, firing his own pistol into the crowd of workers. The platform erupted into a full, desperate brawl. The miners met Lobo's men, swinging shovels against gun butts. Kai pulled Elena off the platform, and they half fell, half slid into the deep mud and darkness below it. "The tunnel!" she gasped, her voice raw. Through the saloon? They ran, bent double, under the feet of the brawling men, under the panicked screams of the crowd. They used the chaos as their shield. They reached the back of the street, unseen, and plunged into the alley. Kai kicked open the cellar door of the Silver Spur. They tumbled down the steps into the familiar darkness. The sound of the riot, of gunshots and shouting, already muffled by the stone. "This way," Elena panted, her hand finding his. She did not grab his left hand. She grabbed his right. She had seen him smother the fuse. She led him through the damp, earthen-smelling passage, the one she had shown him hours before. They moved quickly, their boots echoing in the narrow space. They did not stop in the saloon cellar. She led him deeper, into a connecting tunnel, and then up a rotting wooden ladder. She pushed open a heavy, creaking trap door. They emerged into a small, dark room, thick with the smell of dust, old rope, and canvas. It was a forgotten storage room, part of the old, original train station that had been abandoned when Calder built his new line. It was their prearranged fallback. Elena slammed the trapdoor shut and dropped the heavy iron bar across it. They were, for a moment, safe. The only light came from a single, grime-covered window, where the first, sick, gray light of dawn was beginning to fight the storm. The rain hammered on the tin roof above them. Kai leaned against the wall, his breath tearing from his lungs. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain, which he had held at bay, came for him. It was a white-hot, sickening wave that surged up his arm from his left hand. He gritted his teeth, a low groan escaping him. "Sit," Elena commanded. She was not a saloon singer. She was not a hostage. She was in charge. He slid down the wall, his head thumping against the rough wood. He cradled his left arm. Elena moved to a dusty crate in the corner. It was her go-bag. It held a canteen of water, a small tin of biscuits, and a folded piece of bright, crimson silk, one of her old performance dresses, sacrificed for a more practical purpose. She pulled a strip of it free. She knelt in front of him. "Let me see it." "It is fine," he lied, his voice a harsh whisper. "It is not fine. Kai, let me see it." Her voice was soft, but it held an edge of iron that allowed no argument. Slowly, his face tight with pain, he held out his hand. He had wrapped his neckerchief around it, and the cloth was already soaked through with blood and scorched black. She gently, so gently unwrapped it. The sight made her breath hitch. His palm was a ruin of seared flesh, black and red. The skin split open, bleeding freely. The smell of burned meat and powder filled the small space. "God," she whispered. She uncorked the canteen and poured precious, clean water over the wound. He hissed, his entire body going rigid, but he did not pull away. She cleaned it as best she could, her movements efficient and practiced. "I have no whiskey for it," she said, her voice tight. "Water is fine," he grunted. She took the strip of crimson silk, a material meant for catching the stage lights, and began to wrap it around his ruined hand. The silk was soft against the raw wound, but the contrast was brutal. Bright, beautiful silk on such a terrible injury. "You were a fool," she said, her voice low as she concentrated on the wrapping. "A brave, stupid fool." "It saved the bridge," he said, his eyes closed. "It nearly cost you your hand." She finished the knot, her fingers lingering on his arm. The bandage was stark, a vivid red against his skin. He opened his eyes. He looked at her. She was covered in mud, her hair plastered to her face, a dark, drying cut on her temple from where Lobo had struck her. She looked exhausted, and more beautiful than he had ever seen her. She saw him watching her. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the drumming of the rain. The gray light of dawn was growing, illuminating the fine lines of strain around her mouth, the deep, weary courage in her eyes. A slow, tired smile touched her lips. It was a smile of pure irony. Undress me with your eyes, she teased, her voice barely a whisper. Kai's gaze did not waver. He understood. This was no saloon trick. This was not a game. See if you can find the truth I have hidden. She continued, her voice small, all the performance gone. She was the saloon singer. She was the Pinkerton agent. She was the woman in the velvet dress, laughing with a murderer. She was the woman in the mud, fighting for her life. She was the grieving daughter of a broken miner. She was all of it, and she was terrified. She was offering him all her layers, all at once, and daring him to see the real woman beneath them. He did not smile. His gaze was steady, calm, and absolute. He looked at her, and he did not see the disguises. He saw the fatigue, the bone-deep weariness of a soul who had been fighting alone for too long. He saw the raw courage that had made her walk into Calder's car, that had made her drive her heel into Lobo's boot. He saw the woman who had trusted him with her life, the woman who had sat on a ridge with a mirror to save his. He saw Elena. He raised his good hand, his right hand, and touched her face, his rough fingers gentle on her cheek. He traced the line of mud, his thumb brushing the cut on her temple. I see you, he said. His voice was rough, but the words were a vow. I have seen you since that first night, in the alley. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of a profound, shattering relief. She had been seen. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to turn away. She did not. She leaned toward him. He kissed her. It was not the kiss of a conqueror, not a passionate explosion. It was light. It was slow. It was reverent. It was a kiss of profound respect. It tasted of rain and dust and gunpowder, and beneath it all, the promise of a future. It was a pledge, unspoken, that after the fighting, after Calder, after the blood was washed away, then they would find a name for what this was. He pulled back. She rested her forehead against his for a long second. Her eyes closed. I have to tell you, she whispered, her voice thick. When I first came here, you were just a tool, a link in the chain, the Comanche deputy. I was going to use you to get to Tully, to get to Calder. I know, he said. No, she said, pulling back, forcing herself to meet his gaze. You do not know. I did not care what happened to you. I just wanted to win. For my father, for the job. But then, the fire, the boy you saved, throwing that badge in the mud. She shook her head, a tear finally breaking free, tracing a clean path through the grime on her cheek. I trust you, Kai. I trust you more than I trust the Pinkerton agency. I trust you more than I trust myself. This was her final confession, the last layer, stripped away. Kai took her hand, his good hand, and squeezed it. And I trust you, Elena. We are past the using stage, I think. The reality of their situation came rushing back. The hammering on the roof was joined by a new sound, a distant, metallic rumble, growing louder. The train, Kai said, his eyes going to the dirty window. Calder's guests, the politician, the press, they are arriving. Calder and Lobo. They will not just let us walk away. Elena said, her voice hardening, the soldier returning. They lost the bridge, but they still have the guns. They still have the town. They will spin this. They will say you led an insurrection. They will call us murderers. They will, Kai agreed, unless we spin it first. We have to get the evidence out, she said. The ledger, I lost it. When Lobo grabbed me, it scattered on the platform. It does not matter, Kai said. You have the photographs of the land contracts. I have the real map. You have the receipt for the Gatling gun. I have the blasting cap from the fire. It is enough. It is more than enough. But how? She said. We are trapped in here. The town is locked down. We cannot get to the press. We do not have to, Kai said. He looked toward the wall that faced the main rail line. That telegraph office. Where does the tunnel lead? It connects, Elena said, her eyes widening as she understood. The main cellar runs right beneath it. The reporters on that train, Kai said, a cold, hard plan forming in his mind. Their stories go out on that wire. What if they had a real story to send? He stood, pulling her up with him. The pain in his hand was a dull, hot fire, but his mind was clear. He was no longer a deputy. He was not a fugitive. He was the protector of the spirit spring, and he was the man who loved the woman standing in front of him. This ends now, he said. We will not run. We will not hide. We will use his own stage, his own telegraph, and his own press to burn him to the ground. The train whistle shrieked, sharp and close. The train was pulling into the station, right outside their hiding place. The time for hiding was over. Kai looked at Elena. She looked at him. The promise of the kiss still hung in the air, but it was now a promise of alliance, a promise of war. He held out his good hand. She took it. Their hands, one burned and wrapped in crimson silk, the other stained with ink and mud, clasped tight. Let's go to work, she said. They lifted the heavy iron bar from the trap door and descended back into the darkness of the tunnel, moving toward the sound of the waiting telegraph. They were two people against an army, but they had the truth, and in the first light of dawn, they intended to make it a weapon. The tunnel led them up, not into the cellar, but into a small crawl space beneath the floorboards of the Red Bluff telegraph office. The station was chaotic. The arrival of the politician's train had mixed with the panic from the bridge, creating a confused, shouting mass of people. Kai and Elena emerged through a trap door hidden beneath a stack of old mail sacks. The telegraph operator, a young man with a green eye shade, looked up, his face pale with terror. Before he could shout, Kai was on him, his good hand clamping over the man's mouth. We are not here to hurt you, Kai said, his voice a low, urgent growl. His bandaged hand, wrapped in crimson silk, was a shocking sight. We are here to save this town. You are going to sit. You are not going to make a sound. Do you understand? The young man nodded, his eyes wide. Elena, Kai said, turning. It is yours. Elena sat at the key. The operator stared as her fingers began to fly. A fast, rhythmic, and perfect Morse code. She was not just sending a message. She was sending a war. She sent the name of the shell company, the Red Bluff Development Corporation. She sent the details from the Gatling gun receipt. She sent the figures from the coerced land contracts she had photographed. She sent the coordinates of the real silver map in Kai's pocket. She did not send it to one place. She sent it to the Pinkerton headquarters in Chicago. She sent it to the New York Herald. She sent it to the Marshal's Service in Washington. She sent it to the Army post at Fort Griffin, the one allegedly mobilizing for the fake massacre. She signed it Agent E. Serrano, Pinkerton, evidence of conspiracy and imminent war. Ambrose Calder, Sheriff Tully, Lobo Gray. The machine fell silent, and then it erupted. The sounder on the operator's desk began to clatter wildly. Messages were coming back. A reporter, one of the men who had traveled on the politician's train, was standing near the door, trying to make sense of the riot outside. He heard the urgent, incoming clatter. He knew that sound. He shoved his way into the office. What is going on? Is the line cut? The local operator, his face white, was reading the tape as it spooled out. From Chicago. Message received. Evidence compelling. Stand by. From Washington. Marshal dispatched. Hold all parties. Handiam. The reporter snatched the tape. He read it. His eyes went from confusion to disbelief, and then to the raw, hungry excitement of the story of a lifetime. He ran back out onto the platform, waving the tape. He is a fraud, the reporter screamed, pointing at Ambrose Calder, who was on the platform trying to calm the politician. Calder, he is faking the Indian War. It is a land grab. He has a shell company. He bought the guns. The other reporters swarmed him, tearing at the tape. The news spread through the crowd like fire. What? A fraud. Ambrose Calder's face went from composure to a mask of pale fury. Lies, he roared. It is a trick. That murderer Blackhorn is in there. He has seized the telegraph. He looked at Sheriff Tully. Stop them. Shut that machine down. Control this crowd. Tully, his face purple, saw his entire world dissolving. He drew his pistol. Deputies, form a line. Stop those reporters. Fire if you have to. He fired his pistol into the air. The crowd screamed, turning from a confused mob into a panicked stampede. Tully's remaining deputies, caught between the press and their boss, raised their rifles. Kai and Elena emerged from the telegraph office into the chaos. Kai saw the deputies taking aim, not at rioters, but at the reporters who held the evidence. Woo! Kai roared, his voice cutting through the panic. He saw the Chinese laborer and his men, who were huddled near the baggage car. Miners, to us, protect the people, form a shield, get the reporters to the train. Wu and the Mexican miners, who had tasted victory at the bridge, did not hesitate. They surged forward, not as a mob, but as a disciplined unit. They formed a human wall, their picks and shovels raised, standing between Tully's guns and the civilians. Fire! Tully screamed. The gunfight exploded. It was close, brutal, and desperate. Bullets splintered the wooden platform. But Kai's forces had the advantage of purpose. They were protecting, not just attacking. Kai, using his one good hand, pulled a deputy from the platform, disarming him with brutal efficiency. Lobo Gray, who had been on the platform with Tully, saw it all. He saw the reporters scribbling. He saw his deputies being overwhelmed by miners. He knew, with a criminal's cold logic, that there was one last piece of evidence that could hang them all: the arsenal in the cave. If he could destroy it, blow the entrance, this might all be dismissed as lies. He slipped away from the fight, grabbing a horse and bolting toward the hills. Kai saw him go. He knew instantly where Lobo was headed. He looked at Elena. Hold them. Get the press to safety. I will be back. Kai, your hand, she cried. He was already gone, leaping onto a stray horse and galloping into the rain-soaked dawn, in pursuit of Lobo. Elena did not watch him go. She had her own battle. She saw the reporters, huddled behind the miners, desperate for more. She had one last piece, the tintype. She ran, dodging a stray bullet, back toward Calder's private car. She knew he had a magic lantern, a slide projector. For his investor meetings, she scrambled inside the car, found the projector, and then, from her own boot, she pulled the tintype photo. She fumbled with the mechanism, her hands shaking, and inserted the image. She aimed the projector out the open door of the Olympus, at the flat, rain-soaked, white side of the neighboring baggage car. Kai caught Lobo at the mouth of the arsenal cave. Lobo was already wiring a string of dynamite to the support beams, intent on burying the evidence forever. It is over, Gray, Kai said, dismounting. Lobo spun, his knife in his hand. His face was a snarl of desperate hatred. Not until you are dead, Blackhorn. He lunged. The duel was not a clean fight. It was a muddy, desperate brawl. Kai was hampered by his ruined hand. The crimson silk of his bandage was dark with fresh blood. Lobo was fast and had no rules. He kicked, bit, and clawed. They rolled in the mud, each fighting for control. Lobo gained the upper hand, his knee on Kai's chest, his knife pressed against Kai's throat. You think you have won? Lobo spat, his face inches from Kai's. That fool Tully. He is my half-brother. You know my own blood. Our father always thought he was better. Gave him the law, a clean path. He gave me the dirt, and I have been cleaning up his messes ever since. It was the confession Kai needed. He used the rage, the surprise. He slammed his forehead into Lobo's face, breaking his nose with a wet cartilage crunch. Lobo screamed, his grip loosening. Kai used his legs, coiling and kicking, sending Lobo flying backward. Kai was on him in an instant, his good hand grabbing Lobo's knife, his boot on the man's throat. He did not kill him. He pressed the blade to Lobo's eye. "You are going to tell that story again," Kai panted. "To all of them." He bound the man's hands and dragged him back to his horse. Back at the station, the gunfight was sputtering, and then a light flickered on. On the side of the baggage car, a massive image appeared, projected 10 feet high. It was grainy, but undeniable. Ambrose Calder, Sheriff Tully, and Lobo Gray, standing together, smiling, their arms around each other. The crowd, which had been cowering, went silent. They stared at the image. Tully's deputies, the ones still fighting, stopped. They looked at the giant photograph. They saw their boss, arm in arm with the railroad baron and the most wanted outlaw in the territory. They saw the reporters, furiously writing. They saw the fury in the eyes of the townspeople, the people they were supposed to be protecting. One by one, they dropped their guns. Just then, Kai rode back into the station, dragging a bound and bleeding Lobo Gray behind his horse. He threw the outlaw into the mud at the feet of the miners. The sight broke the last of the spell. Tully's deputies backed away, hands raised. Tully was alone. The crowd, no longer a mob but a jury, surged forward. Led by the reporters and they grabbed the sheriff. He did not even fight. Ambrose Calder saw it all. He saw Tully captured. He saw Lobo captured. He saw his own face projected for the world. He was alone. He did the only thing he could. He ran. He bolted from the platform and into his private car. "The Olympus! Go!" he screamed at the engineer. "Now run them down!" The train's massive wheels spun, shrieked, and bit the track. The engine lurched forward, gaining speed, 10 feet, 20 feet. Then it stopped, with a shuddering metallic groan that threw Calder to the floor. He scrambled to the window. The tracks were blocked. A sea of wild horses, 50, maybe 100 of them. The wild herd from the canyons stood on the tracks, panicked by the train's whistle, their eyes rolling. Kai, sitting on his horse, had seen Calder run for the engine. He had raised his head and let out the high, piercing whistle he had used to call them to salt, to warn them of danger. The herd, which he had helped move to safety in the high cliffs, was close. They heard the call, and in their panic, they had run not away, but down, onto the tracks, forming a living, breathing, an impassable blockade of wild freedom. The Olympus was trapped. A new sound cut through the air, a different whistle. An eastbound train, heavy and official, was pulling into the station on the adjacent track. It was not a passenger train. It was a single, armored locomotive. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He was not a politician. He was tall, dressed in a black, formal suit, and wore a U.S. Marshal's badge. He was flanked by 6 uniformed army soldiers. He was holding a long strip of telegraph tape. He surveyed the scene. Tully, bound. Lobo, bound. Calder, trapped in his train, the giant photograph still projected on the car, the reporters, the silent, watching crowd. He walked past Kai, nodding once, a sign of professional respect. He walked to the door of the Olympus. "Ambrose Calder." The marshal's voice was loud, clear, and final. "By the authority of the United States government, and based on telegraphic evidence received from Agent Elena Serrano of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, you are under arrest for conspiracy, federal fraud, and the incitement of insurrection." The soldiers boarded the car. The rain, as if on cue, began to soften, the gray sky turning a lighter shade. The storm was over. Kai slid from his horse, his body aching, his burned hand a universe of dull fire. He handed the rope holding Lobo Gray to Wu. He walked, his boots heavy with mud. Through the silent crowd, he passed the platform. He looked down and saw it. His badge, the tin star he had thrown away. It was half buried in the mud, its shine gone. He looked at it for a long moment, remembering the man who had worn it. He felt the phantom weight of it on his chest. And then he felt the release. He turned his back on the badge and walked away from it, toward Elena, who was standing by the telegraph office, her face pale, waiting for him. The storm broke as the sun rose, washing the sky a clean, bruised gray. The aftermath of the night was stark. The town of Red Bluff, which had woken expecting a celebration, was now a crime scene. Marshal Bain, the federal man who had arrived on the train, was a man of cold, quiet efficiency. He did not ask questions. He stated facts. Within an hour, he had commandeered the Silver Spur Saloon. The poker tables were pushed together to form a bench. The bar became the witness stand. Ambrose Calder, Sheriff Tully, and Lobo Gray, along with the 3 remaining deputies, sat in custody, their hands bound, their faces a mixture of shock and sullen rage. The reporters, who had scribbled furiously through the entire ordeal, were now the jury of public opinion. The townspeople, quiet and sobered, filled the saloon. It was not a trial, it was a federal deposition, a field hearing to certify the evidence. Marshal Bain laid out the items on the bar, the stack of Elena's photographs showing the coerced land contracts, the bill of sale for the Gatling gun, made out to the Red Bluff Development Corporation, the real surveyor's map, which Kai had produced from his vest, and the copper blasting cap from the Comanche storehouse fire. Elena Serrano was the first to speak. She was no longer a saloon singer. She stood before them as Agent Serrano of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. She spoke clearly, her voice cutting through the silence, detailing the financial trail, the shell company, and the motive. Then Kai was called. He stood, his left hand wrapped in the stark crimson silk, a visible symbol of the fight. He did not speak of justice or law. He spoke of the land. He laid the real map on the table, next to the forged one. He placed the blasting cap next to the bill of sale for the dynamite, and he repeated the confession Lobo Gray had made in the mud. He said Tully was his half-brother. Kai stated, his eyes on the marshal. He said he had been cleaning up his messes for years. Tully lunged, roaring, "You are a liar, a murdering Indian." Marshal Bain did not flinch. He simply motioned to his soldiers, who subdued Tully. "The evidence is certified," Bain said, his voice flat. "The testimony of Agent Serrano, the physical evidence provided by Mr. Blackhorn, and the public confessions of the conspirators are sufficient. Ambrose Calder, Sheriff Tully, Lobo Gray, you are bound over for federal trial in Washington. You will leave on this train." It was over. The structure of lies that had ruled Red Bluff had been dismantled in less than an hour. Later that day, a second meeting took place. Marshal Bain, accompanied by a new, sober-faced representative from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, rode out to the high cliffs where Kai had hidden his people. Kai and Nani met them. The new agent, a man named Harris, looked at the real map, then at the fraudulent contracts. He looked at Nani, whose dignity was as solid as the mountains behind him. "These claims are nullified," Harris stated, his voice tight with anger at the blatant corruption. "The Red Bluff Development Corporation is a fraudulent entity. The Spirit Spring and its surrounding lands are, and will remain, under the protection of the Comanche people." He produced a new document. It was not a treaty, which was often a polite word for a surrender. It was a pact of preservation, written in plain English, recognizing the tribe's sovereign claim to the sacred lands. Nahni did not sign it immediately. He spoke in his language, and Kai translated. He asks what this paper means when the next man like Calder comes. Harris met his gaze. "It means, sir, that the next man will face the full power of the United States Army and the justice system, not as an ally, but as an enemy. This document," he tapped it, "is a promise, and it will be filed in Washington." Nani took the pen and made his mark. Kai returned to the town as the soldiers were loading the prisoners onto the armored train. He found Elena standing with Marshal Bain on the platform. Agent Serrano, Bain was saying. The agency has been notified of your success, and the Pinkerton reward for the capture of Calder, combined with the federal bonus, is substantial. It amounts to $5,000. Elena looked at the train car, where Ambrose Calder stared out through the barred window, his face impassive. I am not an agent anymore. Marshal, I resigned via the telegraph this morning. My father's account is settled. But the reward? Bain insisted. It is yours by right. No, Elena said. She looked past him, at Wu and the Chinese laborers, who were gathered, finally feeling safe. She looked at the Mexican miners, who were tending to the men injured in the fight. The storehouse that burned, the men who were beaten, the families who were threatened. That money belongs to them. I want a victims' compensation fund, administered by you, Marshal, to be distributed to every person in this territory, white or native, who was harmed by Calder's scheme. Bain was stunned, but he nodded. A remarkable request. Miss Serrano, I will see it done. As the train pulled away, carrying the poison out of Red Bluff, Kai walked with Nani. They did not go to the town. They went to the bridge, the great wooden structure that Kai had saved. The rain had stopped, and the canyon below was full of mist. Kai's hand throbbed, the crimson silk a stark reminder. He stood in the center of the bridge, looking down at the river. He had saved a white man's structure, a symbol of the very expansion that threatened his people. Yet, in doing so, he had saved the town, and the land itself. Nani joined him. The elder produced a small pouch of sacred pollen and tobacco. He did not speak. He handed it to Kai. Kai took the pouch with his good hand. He performed the rites. He gave thanks to the earth for its strength, to the river for its patience, and to the spirits of the air for their guidance. He was not a deputy. He was not just a Comanche. He was the man who stood on the bridge between the protector. He had found his place. In the days that followed, Red Bluff began to heal. The first act of this new life was a meeting in the ruins of the burned-out livery. Kai stood there. Wu, representing the Chinese railroad workers, stood with him, and a man named Miguel, the foreman of the Mexican miners, stood with them. They did not speak the same language, not perfectly, but they understood each other. They had bled together. They had won together. Calder is gone, Wu said, his English slow but deliberate. But another will come. The railroad is here. They need us. They need you. He nodded to Miguel. We work for pennies, Miguel said, his voice rough. They treat us like animals, like Calder did. No more. Kai said. He looked at them. This new foundation of the town, we are the law now. We, the people who do the work. He extended his good right hand. Wu placed his hand upon it. Miguel placed his hand on top of Wu's. We form an association, Kai said, the Red Bluff Labor Association. We protect our own. We demand fair wages. We demand respect. Together. They shook hands. It was a new treaty, more powerful than any paper signed by a politician. Kai's last piece of business was personal. His mares. The original reason he had taken the badge. He still had the money he had saved. The $10 per week. He went to the rancher who had bought them. The rancher, having seen Kai's stand at the bridge, and knowing the winds had changed, sold them back for exactly what he had paid. Kai led the 5 beautiful horses, his family's bloodline, into the high valley, the one that opened up near the Spirit Spring. He had dreamed of this moment, of owning them, of rebuilding his family's herd. He ran his good hand over the led mare's neck. She was strong, and she smelled of freedom. He took the rope from her neck, and from the next, and the next. With a slap to their flanks, he sent them running. They ran, not into a corral, but into the open valley, joining the wild herd, the mustangs that had blocked Calder's train. He watched until they were just specks, their manes flying. His freedom was not in owning them. It was in ensuring they were free. That evening, The town of Red Bluff met in the saloon. They had no law. Marshal Bain was leaving. "You need a sheriff." Bain said, "I can appoint one." "No," said the blacksmith, a large, quiet man named Henderson. "We will elect our own." The vote was quick. They did not nominate a politician or a gunfighter. They nominated Henderson. He was honest, he was strong, and he had not been afraid. He accepted. The town had its new law, chosen from the ground up. The sun was setting, painting the washed clean sky in colors of pale gold and lavender. Kai found Elena in the attic room of the Silver Spur. The room was no longer a secret meeting place. It was her home. They were sweeping out the dust. They had found a new project. The old, abandoned watch station, the one where they had hidden, was structurally sound. "It is a good building," Elena had said. "Strong walls." "It is a good place," Kai had replied. "It sees everything." They were planning to turn it into a community reading room, a library, and, with the telegraph operator's help, a public telegraph station. As they worked, cleaning the dust of the old life away, Elena paused. She looked at the windowsill. The small, carved wooden hawk still sat there. It was the signal of danger, the symbol of their conspiracy. She picked it up. She held it in her palm, her fingers tracing the smooth wood. Kai stopped his sweeping. He walked over to her. He looked at the carving, then at her. She held it out to him. He took it with his good hand, the crimson bandage on his left hand a bright splash of color in the fading light. He held the hawk, the carving he had made years ago. It had been his connection to his past. It had become his connection to her. He looked at the new empty bookshelf they had built against the far wall. He walked over and placed the hawk on the shelf. It was not a hidden signal. It was a memory, a foundation stone. The old chapter was closed. The new one was waiting to be written. He turned back to her. The room was quiet, filled with the promise of the evening. The weeks that followed the storm were a time of strange, quiet mending. The high desert air, washed clean of dust and gunpowder, carried the scent of autumn, of curing grama grass and the sharp, clean smell of pine from the high country. Red Bluff was a town that had seen its own ugly reflection and had not looked away. It was, for the first time, a community. The railroad was still coming, the tracks were still being laid, but the engine of greed that drove it, Ambrose Calder, was gone. On his way to a federal prison, the town's future was no longer his. It belonged to the people who had stayed. Kiona Blackhorn, Kai, was a man without a badge. The weight he had carried on his chest for so long was gone, and in its place, he found a different, heavier responsibility. He had not been elected. He had not been appointed. He had simply been chosen. He was the man who walked between. He was no longer a deputy. He was, as Nani called him, the pathfinder. When a dispute over water rights came up between the new homesteaders and the Comanche camps, they did not go to Sheriff Henderson. They came to Kai. He sat with both sides by the riverbank, his left hand, now scarred white and pink from the burn, resting on his knee. He did not speak of law. He spoke of seasons. He spoke of drought. He spoke of need. He brokered a peace based not on paper, but on shared survival. Sheriff Henderson, the blacksmith, was the town's iron. He was honest, and he was strong, but Kai was its water. He was the one who found the path around the rock. He was the guide, the mediator, the man who held the trust of the entire, fragile coalition. He had found his true power, and it had nothing to do with a piece of tin. Elena Serrano did not leave. The Pinkerton agency had sent her a final, large draft for her services and a commendation. She used the money, all of it, to buy the Silver Spur Saloon. The town thought she would reopen it. She did not. The day after she signed the deed, she and Kai and Wu and Miguel began the work. They ripped out the long mahogany bar. They tore down the velvet wallpaper, stained with smoke and whiskey. They took the poker tables and the player piano and sold them, using the money to buy lumber and glass. They built bookshelves. They built long tables and small desks. They installed a new public access telegraph key. 3 weeks later, the Silver Spur Saloon sign was taken down. In its place, a new hand-painted sign went up, the Red Bluff Public Library and Telegraph. Elena's school opened its doors. Her students were a collection of the town's future 2 of WU's nephews, Miguel's young daughter, the boy Kai had saved from the storehouse fire, and the new sheriff's son. They sat at the same table, the one where gamblers had once cheated each other. She taught them reading. She taught them writing, and she taught them code. She sat them around the silent telegraph key, her fingers tapping out a rhythm. "This is power," she told them, her voice clear in the quiet, sunlit room. "A man with a gun can take your land. A man with a pen can steal your name. But a person who can read, who can write, who can send the truth down a wire, that person can change the world. Knowledge is your armor. Never let anyone take it from you." The Harvest Festival that year was not a celebration of profit. It was a celebration of survival. The town gathered in the main square, which had been the scene of a gunfight, and now was filled with food. The Comanche brought deer meat and dried berries. The Mexican families brought tamales and fresh-baked bread. The Chinese laborers, in a gesture that brought tears to many, roasted a whole pig, its skin crisp and perfect. And there was music. It started as 2 separate sounds. From one side of the square, the deep, rhythmic pulse of the Comanche drums, played by the elders. From the other, the fast, melodic strumming of 2 Mexican guitars. For an hour, they played apart, 2 cultures, side by side. Then, slowly, one of the guitarists began to follow the rhythm of the drum. The drummer listened, and his beat softened. Finding the space between the notes, a new sound was born in the twilight. A harmony. It was not Comanche. It was not Mexican. It was Red Bluff. Nani stood next to Wu, and they shared a pipe. Sheriff Henderson danced, large and clumsy, with Miguel's wife. It was a picture of a future that, only a month before, had been impossible. Later that night, Kai and Elena stood in the new library. The festival was winding down. The sounds of laughter were soft, distant. The room was quiet, smelling of new wood and old paper. They were tired. They had been working all day, building the final shelf. Kai was hammering the last nail, his good hand sure and steady, his left hand, the scarred one. He used to brace the wood. Elena leaned against a table, watching him. She was wearing a simple cotton dress, her hair tied back. The cut on her temple had healed, leaving a faint, pale line. She looked content. He finished the nail and set the hammer down. He turned to her. "It is done," he said. She smiled, a slow, real smile. "Is it?" she asked. She pushed herself off the table and walked toward him. She stopped just in front of him. "You have seen me in a saloon dress," she said, her voice low. "You have seen me in mud and breeches. You have seen me in terror and in rage. You have seen me as a liar and as an agent." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his in the lamplight. "Have you undressed all my layers yet? Kiona Blackhorn." He did not smile. He looked at her, his gaze as steady and deep as it had been in the old station storeroom. He saw the woman who had faced down Calder, the woman who had taught children how to send a message, the woman who had, in the past weeks, argued with him about the price of lumber and laughed with him over a shared meal. He raised his good hand, his right hand, and gently touched the scar on her temple. "I do not need to," he said, his voice rough. "I only need my eyes to see the real you. Elena, I saw you then. I see you now." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "And what happens now?" she whispered. "Now," he said, his other hand, the scarred one, coming up to rest on her waist. "We build this, we live." He kissed her, and this time, there was no promise of a future. It was the future itself. It was the kiss of a man and a woman who had fought a war and had, against all odds, found a piece of peace to call their own. They stood in the quiet room, the place of lies they had turned into a house of truth. They had laid their cornerstone. They knew the railroad would keep coming. They knew more men like Calder existed in the world, but Red Bluff was ready. It would keep its sacred lands. It would protect the rights of its workers. It was a town built not on speculation, but on the honor of its word. The next morning, the sun rose, a clean, golden disk. High above the town, a single hawk took to the air. It circled, its shadow passing over the new library, over the telegraph lines, over the sturdy railroad bridge that spanned the canyon. The hawk soared on the updrafts, a symbol of a freedom that was not given by a badge, but was chosen, every single day, by the choices of the heart. Love was not about possession. It was about seeing. Justice was not about punishment. It was about sharing. Kai and Elena rode out, not east or west, but toward the high valley. His scarred hand rested easily on the reins. They rode side by side, their horses moving as one. They stopped at the crest of the ridge and looked out. Below them, the valley was green, the grass thick, the sun was warm on their faces. The wild herd, his mares among them, grazed peacefully by the stream. It was a promise, a long, quiet, and lasting peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed the tale, please subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales, and be sure to like this video. And if you really loved it, please support us by hitting that hype button, so this story can be heard by even more folks.